I say good afternoon to Mr. Ungers. Nice to meet you. Once you said that the history of architecture should be seen like history of ideas, not like enumeration of history of styles. What do you think now about it? Do you have the same idea?
I think if one deals with history, it is not a question to be eclectic, to take history as a quarry or as a vocabulary which one can copy. If one talks about history in architecture and one looks at the past, one has to find out the different structures which might have similarity to our structures of thinking and of doing architecture. And therefore, I think it is mostly a history of ideas and not a history of artifacts. Because this, of course, would be disastrous. Then we would have, and this is done in many places, just historical copies, which would be not that one could satisfy, that one could look for.
In 1979, in an essay in Lotus International, you wrote about invisible cities of Calvino, and I quote you because you say, when Kublai Khan asked Marco Polo, journeys to relive your past, and you write it down in this essay, which could have been formulated something like journeys to recover your future. This is a question. What does it mean for your architecture, past and future, and how you relation with them?
The past is very important for the future, because one cannot think a future without knowledge about the past, which I think is impossible, because the past establishes places, special places of memory, and those places of memory are an important base to think of future possibilities, either as a continuation of the past or as an alternative. Depends what your concept is. But without a place, without any memories, without any backbones, so to speak, of historical facts or of historical events, one, so to speak, would sit in a vacuum, in a space which has no location. And therefore, I think that locations, and particular for an architect, his personal memories are very important if he is not only a technician, but if he wants to be more creative, and if he wants to establish something of permanence, it would be very important to have his own situation established in a memory.
Your architecture are composition of geometries and proportion. I think in this moment the German ambassador residence in Washington, or Basler, Versicherung offices in Cologne are architecture absolutely essential, where the architectural language is plain and simple. Do you think that dignity and the clearness could be elements of composition?
The architecture is not plain.
Essential.
It is not simple.
Okay, yeah.
The architecture is highly complicated. And I have to use a citation of Valéry.
Yeah.
What could be more full of secrets than the clarity? Because it is much more important to leave things out to reduce something to its absolute core,
To scream.
to the basic,
Yeah. To take off the cream.
to take off,
Yeah.
to take away, instead of making 20 sentences,
Yeah.
to make one. Gottfried Benn will tell you that it is the most difficult thing in literature to make a short lyric poem. I mean, when I was a young man, and when I built my first house, which I hopefully can show later on, I tried to show that I was able to do anything on invention or architectural tricks that one could do as a young man to make myself known and to show what I was capable of. But in the age I'm now, the question is not me to do as much as possible. The question is to do as less as possible. And I tell you, this is more exciting, and it is more, it needs more concentration than of being,
Baroque or
to do everything you can.
yeah. And what's about material for you? Are heights, most of all, new materials? Are for you useful, or maybe can damage your architecture?
The material has, I mean, let me say the following. I think architecture is basically geometry and material. These are the two basic components of architecture. I'm not talking about functions or anything like that, which I think is irrelevant. For instance, for the Villa Rotonda, the function was completely irrelevant. It has never been used, it was not built to be used, and that was the same for the Villa Savoy by Corbusier and other buildings by the Farnsworth House and so on. That's one thing, that material and geometry are the two basic elements of architecture. Now, material also has a metaphoric element. It tells stories. For instance, stones are heavy, plaster is light, and so on. You can see this in all the Renaissance palaces. The first floor are full of big stones. The second floor in Alberti's Roquelaire is very flat, and then on the upper floor it is just an open structure. So material can be a metaphor or metaphoric for the idea of heavy to light and things like that. In my last building, which I did for myself, I was searching for something that would not tell any story anymore. So the material itself would not be metaphorically used. Therefore, it has no structure, no quality, so to speak. It is almost immaterial. I was trying to find out if architecture could be abstract, could be like an abstract painting by Mondrian or something like that. And we had a long discussion with my son about it, if architecture as such is even possible of being abstract. And we found out it cannot, because it still has windows, and it still has something which it tells. It still has an entrance or something like that. You cannot architecture bring to such a level that there would be no narrative story anymore. And this was, on the one side, for me, quite a disappointment, but on the other side, it was an experience which I had to go through in order to learn that complete abstraction is not possible in architecture. It is possible in painting, by, for instance, that you paint a white surface or blue like Yves Klein, unique architecture cannot accomplish that.
So architecture could be art or not? Are two different things, art and architecture? They have maybe different mechanism to produce themselves?
It might be that one could call this mechanism, or one could call it the language of architecture is different than it has an own language. It has an own syntax. So in this syntax and this language is different from any other art. And you cannot overcome it with architectural means. Then you would have only descriptively you can overcome it, but you cannot overcome it with reality and with architectural means.
Briefly, is the last question. What do you think about the new architecture of today? Not yours, but the others.
The new architecture of today frightens me, to a certain extent, because it is not what I understand under architecture, and I understood my life long under architecture. It's becoming an event. So the event architecture, and you cannot do anything today anymore with creating any eventful building with some crazy or some outrageous ideas, which they think. And every developer wants to have an event. He doesn't want to have architecture. If you come to him with a simple building, like some, let's say, a Mies building, he wouldn't even look at it if you don't have any kind of
ornaments
or eventful
strange forms,
strange things. Go to China, go to other places where they build all those high-rise buildings. It frightens me. I mean, those buildings are horrifying. They are
unhuman, I think.
They're not only unhuman, they are unarticulated, even if they are very outrageously in their forms and whatnot. So in all these events, it is necessary to concentrate. So I would like a building which would stand in a place, interpret the place in such a way that it has been there ever, and not creating always something new. You not any Monday a new idea. This is what Mies van der Rohe said. And imagine how long it took from a simple hut to build, let's say, the Acropolis. How many years, centuries, steps, slow developments, refinements, more complex, but always the same thing. So refinement and the more intensive study of a building would be more important than the extreme forms.
Yeah, this is true. This is, I think, the right way to think about architecture. Thank you, Mr. Ungers.